This is Racing Across America with Seth Merrow.
Welcome back to Racing Across America on this Thursday morning. Happy to be joined now by Dave Grening of the Daily Racing Forum. Good morning, Dave.
Good morning, Seth. How are you?
Very good. Happy to have you on board, particularly after an interesting New York Racing Association board meeting yesterday. It was promoted as a meeting that would take a little bit of a look at the future. And before we get into it, Dave, can you explain exactly what the situation is now? There's a plan that's supposed to come out in April, and then again, the franchise is under a little bit of a question mark coming into the end of 2015, and I don't think it's clear to people who saw the franchise defined a couple of years ago what exactly the situation is. So before we get into the meeting, can you give us a little bit of a background on just what the situation is going into 2015?
Well, basically, the state, in the fall of 2012, October 2012, the state sort of took over NYRA and appointed a whole new board, which included some members of the previous board. And they called this the New York Racing Association Reorganization Board. And basically, they were charged with a 3-year term of trying to, plan out the future of NYRA with the idea of returning it to private control in the fall of 2016, so October. Whether that means they're going to put it up for bid, or whether that means there's some faction of what is currently NYRA right now, that's it. I'm still not totally sure of, to be honest with you. But this board was charged with putting together a plan for the future of New York racing that they had to hand in to the governor, to the state, by April of 2015, and then the state would review it and either take the recommendations, reject the recommendations, or come out with whatever the blueprint for New York racing is supposed to be in the fall of 2015. This board is trying to beat that deadline by perhaps coming up with a plan that they could either announce and or distribute in the next board meeting, December 3rd. I have a hard time believing that they'll have a full-blown plan in place by then. But I believe that the next board meeting they'll have a little bit more, I'm hoping they have a little bit more in the way of details than they certainly did yesterday. And between December 3rd and April, they will get that plan on paper and present it to Governor Cuomo and his staff.
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, it's confusing to me. As you say, will it be up for bid or not? That seems not to be completely answered. I had Chris Kay on with me the last day of the meet, and I said to him, I'm confused about this. And he said, yeah, it is kind of confusing. And I was even not any less confused after talking to him. I'm not sure this bodes well for what will happen in 2015, but we'll see how that happens. And again, yesterday at the meeting, they talked a little bit about the future, the path to the plan and whatnot. I think the notable thing that came out of it was the future of Aqueduct. And I don't know whether they put anything definitive as the future of Aqueduct, but they essentially said, we're at least pushing the decision off until there's a more permanent board in place.
Yeah, that's the key. I mean, to me, you can't have a future plan for New York racing until you decide what you're going to do with Aqueduct. And it just seemed to me that Governor Cuomo, in statements that he has made to editorial boards, whether it be the Daily News or whether it be the Albany Times Union or whomever, has sort of championed a different use for Aqueduct, that property, than a racetrack. Now, I guess in order to do that, you need to come up with what are you going to do with it. And, simply, some people think it's just simple as, well, take it over and put some more hotels or something there or expand a casino. But the expansion of a casino for gambling is not in the cards, pardon the pun, for a while. And if at all, and there's just no other use right now that I've seen that anyone's come up with for that property. So this board is basically saying, look, we're not going to take it upon ourselves to define the future of Aqueduct if we're not necessarily the board that's going to be running things in New York racing past 2015. So they're basically saying that when they come up with a plan, they're not making any recommendations to change basically what is the status quo. But I will have to think behind the scenes that they are working on some things. Like, for example, after the meeting, in interviewing with, there's been a lot of rumors on the backstretch here in Belmont that there's a plan to put in a sort of a version of an inner track inside of the turf courses at Belmont. And so yesterday, when Chris Kay mentioned that we kind of hedged about it and said, well, you saw our Belmont meet where we lost 47 races. We had a synthetic track that was inside those turf courses, we could have held the fields together when those races came off. So it's not necessarily a plan to put in a winter track there, but an idea of maybe putting in a synthetic track that, when races come off the turf, like they in droves, like they did at the Belmont Fall Meet, that maybe you just move it to a synthetic track and the fields hold together. Now, that's not to say that it couldn't be used for winter racing either, but it's not exclusively, with the idea of that. But, and it's not a permanent plan, it's just something that's sort of been floated about.
Yeah, and interesting, you just kind of alluded to it, too, at the start of your comments. It seems like if we get into 2015 and things are being put up for bid, or they're looking at possibly changing ownership, it does seem like they would have to have a plan in place for Aqueduct so that the potential new owner would know what they're getting with their dollars that they're going to spend. So it does seem like Aqueduct plays into it somehow in 2015.
It does, and I'm guessing that if they, the governor or the whoever rubber stamps or comes up with the plan, whatever it might be, based on the recommendations that are made, and other people might have input in there that's not necessarily the board. If they indeed say, well, this is what New York Racing is going to be, I'm sure it'll say, well, you'll have Aqueduct for either the term of the franchise, which is mostly 2033, or you won't. Or, Aqueduct could go the way of the dodo any day. I just don't know. Maybe it's sort of, I don't know. It's very confusing, and put it this way, I think you're going to see the status quo for many years to come, basically the way I look at it.
Yeah, and that's kind of what it seemed like. And it also seems like, they're talking about a transition in 2015, but does it seem like, again, it's confusing and it's not defined, but it seems like the way they're talking, it's going to be just a new NYRA that will, maybe tweaking things up, but things will probably stay the same. That's the feeling I get anyway.
It's likely to be that, but the biggest difference would be that it would no longer be under state control. Like the state, you could see in 2015, let's say they look at what NYRA's business plan is and they like it. They say, look, NYRA's, they figured it out. They figured a way to make themselves profitable because that's what the other big news was, is that, they've budgeted for a $250,000 surplus, which in 2014, which actually became $1.5 million surplus, which in 2015 is budgeted to be $2.1 million. So let's say that, and that's exclusive of VLT revenue. So let's say the state looks at that and says, oh, they're on the right track. You know what, we're going to just hand it over to this group, and they're NYRA, and we'll just pull back on some of our control of it. They'll still have to answer to us, but we're not going to, the board is supposed to come down from 17 to say 13 or so, and so some of those appointees might go by the wayside. That's either Cuomo or Shelley Silver, Gello's appointed. And it's just, here. You've done a good job, run with it. That could very well happen. I'm sure that's what this group, led by Chris Kay, wants to happen. And, they're coming up at least on paper showing all the right moves.
All right, let's talk about some of the other things that were discussed at the meeting. One of them, again, you talk about the surplus, and you go back to, they also talked about negative numbers at Aqueduct, the recent Belmont Park Fall meeting, certainly affected by the weather, some down numbers there as well. But they're making some business decisions to increase revenues, and one of them sounds like maybe kicking up the tickets at next year's Belmont Stakes.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Kay sort of hinted at that when he was asked about pricing for Belmont, and sort of alluded to the fact that he thought as it turned out, the $300 charge, the champagne room, which is like the first floor with the Belmont, what a lot of people down here know as the Belmont Cafe, which is just sort of dressed up to be, like a 1979 prom scene. But it was, they charged $300 a ticket, and he kind of alluded to the fact that, we could have charged more. So I think that's an indication to me that they're looking to raise prices for this year's Belmont. And I know that they're trying, Chris Kay also mentioned that he would like to try and put the tickets on sale earlier than that has been done in the past, like maybe even in time for people to purchase them as Christmas presents. Now, there might be some issues with Ticketmaster that might preclude that, but I know that's sort of what they want to do. To me, it's not a long-term business plan to show profitability based on raising prices, whether it be ticket prices, admission prices, or your simulcast signal, and just firing people left and right, which they seem to do. They cut salary by I think even $700,000 more than they even initially planned to do, and and obviously they've accrued money from raised prices. I don't know that that's a long-term solid business plan, but that's what has worked so far to get them into the plus numbers right now.
I also found it, excuse me, very notable, and I don't know whether we've heard this from Chris Kay before, but he, in this meeting, or after the meeting, whenever the comments were made, defended the VLT money that NYRA gets. It seems like kind of under the thumb of the state a little bit. Past comments seem to talk about running the racetrack without using the VLT money, and he never tied it in, but he did talk about, gee, we gave up a lot of real estate in return for this VLT money, and so we're entitled to that. And I was kind of heartened to see him defend that a little bit, because I think looking for some of those of us who have watched this over the past few years in the franchise battle that went on, to see him give up that the rights to the land, and then a couple of years later have the franchise be in flux and the VLT money kind of not being counted into things. I took that as a little bit of a positive for him to defend NYRA and the VLT money they do get.
Well, he's been doing that all along. He's just trying to separate that from operating expenses. He wants the racing end to pay for the racing end, and perhaps use the VLT money to pay for other. He mentioned yesterday pensions and federal taxes that they owe, and maybe and capital improvements, which they are making. I mean, with Aqueduct, I can't say that I could justify them saying that this is $14 million worth of improvements. And I guess some of that includes long shots, the simulcast facility, probably almost half, or maybe a third. But, I mean, Aqueduct does look better. I mean, it does look better. What they need to work on at Aqueduct is getting back control of their concessions, because the prices are beyond outrageous. I mean, $7.50 per bottle of soda. Even though Grening is the one in charge right now of those concessions, it just turns people off. And, NYRA is still negotiating with Grening, and I know Chris Kay said that hopefully in the next 30 to 45 days they can get concessions back, and some of the pricing will become maybe a little bit more realistic. But, yeah, that's where we're at.
And let me shift attention now to, excuse me, Saratoga, because it seemed like, and was this confirmed? Is it a done deal that the calendar essentially stays the same in 2015?
The budgeting, the way he phrased it is they're budgeting it as Saratoga will stay the same structure, 6-day a week racing, adding and that 4-day week. So you basically go from July 24th to September 7th. I guess there was some pushback from somewhere on this. I know that the 5-day a week thing was championed by Kay and the racing office, Martin Panza, and I'm not exactly sure what the main stumbling block was. I know there was some thought that that maybe the added expense for some of the out-of-town guys that come from Kentucky, they might elect not to come with full stables instead, and because of the entry schedule where you enter Monday for Friday, you just enter, look at the races, and if you're if you feel like you're 5-1 or less, you'll come. If you're 20-1, you'll stay home. And not having those horses on the ground where you could get them more readily than that, I think was a concern. The added expense of another week for rent and stuff was a concern. But I don't know specifically if there was any pushback from upstate residency or businesses or residents that you're here long enough.
And you triggered a thought, and this news may be new enough that you haven't had a chance to get any feedback, but I'm just wondering, in talking to NYRA officials over the past couple of days, or maybe on the backstretch, Maryland announced their 2015 schedule, and they're adding racing at Laurel throughout much of the month of August. I'm wondering if you've gotten any buzz of how that might affect Saratoga.
Yeah, I haven't. I know it's an 11-day meet, so you wonder, like an outfit like, say, a Michael Trombetta, what does he do? Does he still come to Saratoga? I know he came up. I don't know if he won a race there last year. He did. I think it was only one. Or do you say, I'll take my chances and try and win my races here with an 11-day meet? I don't know what the purse structure will be vis-a-vis Saratoga. Obviously it won't be close, but how close will it be? And if you can win a race, even if it's for 2/3 the pot, as opposed to banging your head and running your horse running his eyeballs out and running a stiff to get for even a bigger pot, maybe you stay back. But it sort of is a continually what I like to call a wheels plus round matter of fact in racing. That Laurel would go with a summer meet when there's Monmouth and Parks and Delaware and Saratoga. It just doesn't make sense to me to have that meet. But I'm not a man on the horse, and I'm sure those guys want to be at the road somewhere. They lost Colonial Downs basically, so this is sort of a bone for them.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if that does have an effect. And Dave, before I let you go, let's just touch on a couple other things you've written about in the Racing Forum recently, tied into NYRA. NYRA at the various meets is going to be holding quarterly community meetings looking for some public input.
Yeah, it actually starts on Saturday at Long Shots. I believe it's 9:30 this Saturday morning. NYRA, Chris Kay with some selected managers will meet with fans and to get their input about what's going on, and they plan to do that every quarter. I think they'll have another one in March at Aqueduct. They'll have one at Belmont in the spring, and I'm sure they'll have one at Saratoga next summer.
And also wanted to touch, because you did a nice little piece on Chad Brown after the Breeders' Cup where he said it was settling in. I'm just wondering what his reaction was, because clearly, for those of us who follow New York racing, and really nationally, but particularly New York and Saratoga and from this area, obviously, so we're familiar with Chad and how successful he's been. But I kind of looked at Breeders' Cup as maybe a breakout weekend for him. The 3 wins, there was a profile of him in the New York Times, and to me, as I say, just kind of seemed like almost a career breakout kind of a situation. How did he react after the weekend?
Yeah, I think he was really happy with things, and to have as much confidence as he did in Lady Eli, and for her to deliver like that. Last year I know he had almost the same amount of confidence in Bobby Stick going to juvenile turf, and that horse ran third. I remember he was very disappointed. And then that horse comes back and maybe puts into performance of the weekend in the turf sprint. Another decision that he made. He made a couple of decisions that I'm not going to say were questionable, but that were risky for the selected horses. And that horse had never been down the hill before, and usually that race, at least at San Anita, is won by horses that have down the hill experience. And it came with a flying finish to win. And even the day at the spot, it's never been beyond a mile and 1/8 before. And he basically pulled a page out of his mentor Bobby Frankel's playbook with a horse by the name of Intercontinental about a decade ago, 2005. She won what was then the Windstar Galaxy, which is now the First Lady of Keelan. And basically Bobby rolled the dice and said, look, this is a silly flash start. Let's run her in the Breeders' Cup. Maybe she can steal it. And she did. It was at Belmont Park, and she did. And then Chad said he was thinking the same exact thing when Dave won the First Lady. He said, you know what, I might try and do what he did. And it worked out. Never still he ran the race when Giuseppe Stitt ran second. He's actually going to get Stephanie Stitt back. They did sell, because I guess $3.9 million at auction wasn't enough for Ken Ramsey. So he's getting her back to point for a 2015 campaign. And it's not totally out of the question that Dave Spa would come back. Whether of course that's Chad or not, I'm not sure. At least Stone Street bought her. They could use her as a premier prospect, but then again, they could say, hey, let's have a little fun. They liked the race. They kept Minded really around for a long time, trying to get her back, and it didn't work out, but they do like the race. So I wouldn't be stunned if Dave Spa came back, and I would imagine if he did, why not give it a shot? He's got the most success to it. So, I think he's just proud of the fact that he took some shots, they paid off, he had a ton of confidence in that Philly Lady Eli, so much so that may even parlay into a championship, because unless Patriarch Brandy goes to Delta and wins that race, I think a lot of people are going to look at the Breeders' Cup juvenile fillies as a fluke to Patriarch Brandy, and really, who's the other one in contention for championship? It's Lady Eli.
Yeah, that's talking to people the last couple of weeks about the Breeders' Cup. That's kind of a consensus. She looks like, despite racing on the grass, looks like the leader in the clubhouse at this point for that 2-year-old filly championship. And Dave, before we let you go, let's get some Breeders' Cup thoughts from you. We've been talking the last couple of weeks with all the guests. Untappable looks great. Rosie Napravnik then announces the retirement. Breeders' Cup Classic, which had the chance to decide some Eclipse divisions, winds up being a little controversial with the non-DQ, but an impressive performance from Bayern. What were some of the highlights or thoughts for you coming out of the Breeders' Cup?
Well, Bobby's hitting performance really stood out to me. Just that performance to be able to close that much ground in that short of time was tremendous. It gets overlooked. I think another performance that gets overlooked is Texas Red as a juvenile. I'm not saying he's next year's Kentucky Derby winner, but my God, when going into that race, everyone thought that the track was Steve, sort of reminiscent of the Friday 2013 Breeders' Cup program. And then this horse comes from last and just runs by a decent field. I know it got decimated a little bit by the American Sparrow coming out, and even Calculator, who Wild Maiden was still a nice horse. Untappable, probably the best performance of her career. I wasn't necessarily sold on her. I thought she was beating up mostly in a weak bunch of 3-year-old fillies, but she certainly showed that she's gotten better and matured throughout the year with that performance. And yeah, the Classic overshadowed everything. My colleague Jay Pridman reported yesterday that California Chrome looks like it's going to run one more time on the turf at the Hollywood Derby, which was actually going to be at Del Mar. And you know what? I'm really hoping he wins it. Right? I need something to make this a little bit easier, because Bayern had a tremendous year, but my goodness, to end it like that, it was a great performance, but to come over and take out half the field, including two of your main rivals, one early and one late, left a bad taste in my mouth. So I'll put on my purple shirt when California Chrome runs in the Hollywood Derby and hope that it gets it done.
Yeah, I'm applauding the continuing to run after the Breeders' Cup, trying a new surface. That's fun. And just one more thing I want to touch on. When you mentioned the tappable, it triggered. Have you talked to Bill Mott at all about closed hatches?
I did. Actually, I talked to him yesterday briefly, and he said that he's home. I don't know that they've got official word that she's retired, but everything pointed to going into the race that if she didn't run up the bar, that she would be retired. And unless Prince has a change of heart, I would imagine that she's retired. I think Bill's operating under the assumption that he will not get her back unless there's some sort of change of heart.
Yeah, 2 in a row like that, but certainly a very nice career. All right, Dave, as always, we appreciate the visit, the recap of the board meeting and beyond, and we'll talk to you again.